All right, today we're heading to the shores of the Baltic Sea to get into the incredible story of Latvia. Seriously, this is a nation whose entire history feels like it was forged in fire. A land constantly caught between giants, yet somehow it has always found a way to endure and to sing its own song of freedom. So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at its ancient past as a land of contention, a crossroads for empires. Then we'll see how a truly unique national identity awakens. From there, we dive into the brutal century of storms. And finally, we'll explore how Latvia won back its independence and the unbelievable price it had to pay for it. Our story kicks off right here, in a place whose geography was both a blessing and a curse. For more than 800 years, this land was a battleground. Its prosperous cities were a constant target for conquest by pretty much every great power in the neighborhood. But way before the empires showed up, this place was a mosaic of distinct realms. You had these proud Baltic tribes, the Curonians, the Latgalians, and up in the north, the Finnic-speaking Livonians. These weren't just scattered people. They had their own rulers, their own cultures, their own chiefdoms. It was a complex world about to collide with an unstoppable force from the west. I mean, just look at this timeline. It's a dizzying, head-spinning succession of rulers. First, you've got German crusaders, the Livonian order setting up shop. Then, bam, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth takes over. After them, the mighty Swedish Empire steps in. And finally, the massive Russian Empire under Peter the Great rolls in. Every single one of these powers left its mark. Now, the arrival of German merchants and crusaders back in the 12th century, that was an absolute game changer. The founding of the city of Riga in 1201 created a commercial powerhouse. By 1282, it had joined the Hanseatic League. Think of it as this super powerful medieval trading club, and that just transformed Riga into one of the most critical hubs in Northern Europe. It was the bridge between East and West. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. For centuries, you have foreign nobles and German merchants running the show in the cities. But while all that's happening, something really powerful is starting to stir out in the countryside during the 19th century, the birth of a modern Latvian identity. And this wasn't a military uprising, not at first. It was a cultural one. A new group of educated Latvians who got the nickname the Young Latvians started pushing back. They were tired of centuries of German cultural dominance. So what did they do? They started digging into their own unique folklore, collecting thousands of traditional songs called dainas, and they championed the Latvian language. They were laying the intellectual groundwork for a nation. And this is why that cultural movement was so explosive. Think about it. Over 90% of the population could read. That meant newspapers, poetry, and political ideas about self-determination just spread like wildfire. Literacy literally became the fuel for the fire of independence. Then came World War I, and the chaos of collapsing empires created the ultimate window of opportunity. You had these Latvian riflemen who, while fighting for the Tsar, forged this incredible sense of national unity in the trenches. So as the Russian and German empires started to crumble, Latvian leaders seized the moment and declared independence. But, and this is key, that declaration had to be defended with blood and iron in a brutal 2-year war before it was finally secure. But here's where the story takes a really dark turn. That celebration of independence was tragically short-lived. Sure, the first couple of decades of freedom were a vibrant time of nation-building, but Latvia was sitting right on top of a geopolitical fault line, and the rise of Hitler and Stalin was about to unleash a century of storms on this young republic. This document, right here, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, was basically a death warrant for Latvia's freedom. Publicly, it was just a non-aggression pact between Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Soviet Union. But in reality, there was a secret protocol, hidden from the world, that just carved up Eastern Europe. And just like that, Latvia was handed over to the Soviet sphere of influence. Its fate was sealed, and not a single Latvian was in the room. The Soviet occupation in 1940 was swift, and it was brutal. To crush any potential resistance, they started mass deportations. In just 1 year, 34,000 of Latvia's political, military, and intellectual leaders were rounded up and shipped off to Siberian gulags. And then, as if that wasn't horrific enough, the Nazi invasion followed, bringing with it the Holocaust, which systematically murdered nearly all of Latvia's 80,000 Jews. After the Red Army pushed the Nazis out in 1944, a second, much longer Soviet occupation began. And Moscow had a deliberate policy of Russification, basically to dilute Latvian culture. They built huge factories and brought in hundreds of thousands of workers from all over the Soviet Union. And the demographic impact? Just look at this chart. It's staggering. In 1935, Latvians were 77% of the population. By 1989, they were barely a majority in their own country. And yet, through 50 years of occupation, deportations, and Russification, that flame of the national spirit that was lit back in the 19th century, it just refused to go out. The dream of freedom was passed down from parent to child, just waiting for its moment. So when the Soviet Union finally started to weaken, Latvians didn't reach for guns. They reached for their most powerful weapon, their culture. Song has always been central to their identity. And in what became known as the Singing Revolution, hundreds of thousands of people would gather, waving forbidden flags and singing patriotic songs. It was this profoundly powerful, totally peaceful movement that led to independence being restored in 1991. But winning political freedom was just the start of a whole new struggle. Decades of Soviet planning had left the economy in absolute ruins. The switch to a market economy was incredibly painful, and as this blunt quote from economist Alf von X tells you, the path forward was not going to be some simple success story. So after joining the EU in 2004, Latvia had this massive economic boom, mostly fueled by easy money from foreign banks. But when the 2008 global financial crisis hit, that bubble didn't just burst, it exploded. The economy went from growing over 10% one year to shrinking by a catastrophic 17% just 2 years later. It was one of the worst economic crashes anywhere in the world. To get international loans and avoid bankruptcy, Latvia chose a path called internal devaluation, a really brutal austerity program. This meant instead of devaluing their currency, the government just slashed everything internally, and the human cost was immense. Public sector salaries cut by 40%. A third of civil servants fired, schools closed, unemployment hit 20%. It was a deeply, deeply painful price to pay. But despite all of that economic hardship, Latvia has absolutely achieved its biggest post-independence goals. Joining NATO and the European Union in 2004 was this huge, historic return to Europe. It was a powerful guarantee of the security and the sovereignty that had been denied to them for so long. And that brings us to today. After centuries of fighting empires, surviving occupations, and enduring economic collapse, Latvia is really a testament to the power of resilience. So the final question is, what's next? Will its biggest challenge be building a stable economy for everyone, or will it be preserving its unique culture in our crazy globalized world? The next chapter in this incredible story is still being written.